Jersey Mike's built one of America's fastest-growing restaurant chains by refusing to follow the sandwich industry's favorite rule: take time out of the sandwich. For decades, the dominant chain model was designed to make the process faster. Slice the meat before the customer arrives, portion the ingredients so nobody behind the counter has to think, make the store inexpensive, make the operation efficient, and open enough locations that convenience becomes the product. That formula helped Subway build the largest restaurant footprint in the United States. It peaked at roughly 27,000 American restaurants around 2015 and early 2016. By the end of 2024, it was down to 19,502. Jersey Mike's kept the one piece of equipment that this model tries to make unnecessary: the slicer. Its employees cut the meat and cheese in front of the customer to order on a machine that must be operated carefully, cleaned thoroughly, and maintained constantly. It adds labor. It adds training. It adds seconds to every transaction. By the efficiency rules the sandwich industry spent decades perfecting, it is the wrong decision. And yet the average Jersey Mike's now generates approximately $1.4 million a year, more than twice the average volume reported for Subway. Jersey Mike's produced about $4.2 billion in system-wide sales in 2025, from 3,256 restaurants. It has recorded positive same-store sales growth for 20 consecutive years. And in 2026, it entered the American Customer Satisfaction Index at number 1, ending Chick-fil-A's 11-year run at the top. Then, on July 30th, 2026, Jersey Mike's rang the bell at the New York Stock Exchange. The offering sold 43.5 million shares at $23 each and raised roughly $1 billion, making it one of the largest restaurant IPOs in years. The stock opened below the offer price and closed its first day down about 6%, which leaves two questions. How did the slower, more labor-intensive way of making a sandwich become the winning one? And what happens to a business built on 50 years of patience the moment it starts reporting results every quarter? To answer either, you have to start with a 17-year-old knocking on his football coach's door. The shop was called Mike's Subs. It opened in 1956 in Point Pleasant, New Jersey, serving shore residents and the families who arrived each summer from New York, Philadelphia, and beyond. Peter Cancro began working there in 1971, at 14. The store learned customers' names. Vacationers returned the next season. Locals came back the next week. That matters because the thing Cancro would eventually scale was not only a sandwich recipe. It was the feeling of being recognized inside a neighborhood shop. In 1975, while Cancro was a high school senior planning to study law at the University of North Carolina, the owners decided to sell. His mother suggested that he buy the place instead, which is the sort of parental advice that sounds charming only after it works. The price was $125,000, roughly $750,000 in today's money. Cancro did not have it. He approached potential investors but did not want to surrender control to a partner. Then, on a Sunday night, he went to the home of Rod Smith, his former youth football coach, who also happened to be a banker. Smith helped him secure the financing. The deal closed on March 31, 1975. Cancro was 17, still enrolled in high school, and legally too young to operate the deli slicer in his own restaurant. Hold on to that detail. He owned the business before he was old enough to touch the piece of equipment the entire brand would eventually revolve around. And then, for a long time, almost nothing spectacular happened. During the 1980s, Cancro opened additional local restaurants. In 1987, he began franchising and renamed the company Jersey Mike's, turning the place of origin into part of the product. Growth came quickly at first, reaching roughly 35 stores around the Jersey Shore. Then, the 1991 recession tightened credit and exposed how little cash the company had kept in reserve. Cancro fell millions of dollars into the negative and dismissed the entire 6-person corporate staff, including his brother. Jersey Mike's survived, but it took until 2015, 40 years after Cancro bought the original shop, to reach 1,000 locations. It then more than tripled in roughly another decade. Most restaurant chains explode early and spend the rest of their lives trying to manage what they built. Jersey Mike's was the inverse: 4 decades of grinding, followed by a growth curve that looks like somebody changed the formula. But the sandwich had barely changed. The country changed around it. To understand what happened, you have to understand what the slicer is actually doing. Freshly sliced meat has a different texture from meat portioned days earlier and sealed in plastic. It can be cut thin and folded loosely instead of stacked. Customers may not describe the physics, but they can experience the difference. The food, however, is only part of the value. The larger function is that the slicer makes preparation visible. In most quick-service restaurants, freshness is a claim printed on the wall. At Jersey Mike's, the customer watches a solid piece of meat become the portion in the sandwich. They see the cheese cut with it, the bread opened, and the toppings added. The production line becomes advertising space. That is why the process is allowed to take longer. Pre-slicing everything before lunch would move the queue faster, but it would remove the most important evidence that Jersey Mike's is different. Mike's Way completes the effect. Onions, lettuce, tomatoes, oil, vinegar, and spices are not a complicated recipe. But giving the sequence a name turns 6 decisions into one order. It preserves customization, the emotional appeal of a deli, while creating standardization, the economic requirement of a chain. The employee appears to make the sandwich personally, but the choreography can be taught and repeated in thousands of restaurants. There is a real cost. Slicing to order requires labor, training, cleaning, and maintenance. It puts rotating blades and ready-to-eat ingredients into independently operated kitchens, raising safety and sanitation demands. Jersey Mike's did not discover a way around those costs. It chose to pay them every day, because what it bought was a position competitors cannot copy without making their own operations permanently more expensive. Subway spent decades removing time and labor from the sandwich. Jersey Mike's preserved the expensive step. Then, American customers began paying a premium for food that looked made rather than assembled. Jersey Mike's did not chase that change. It had spent 40 years waiting where the change eventually arrived. Deliberate inefficiency only works if the rest of the operation stays controlled. Jersey Mike's menu offers enough combinations to feel generous, but it rests on a compact set of components. In 2025, cold sandwiches produced about 2/3 of sales. Hot subs accounted for roughly 1/5. The same meats, cheeses, vegetables, and breads repeat across the menu, limiting inventory, training, and waste. Limited time offers create interest without permanently taking over the kitchen. The result is variety for the customer and repetition for the operator. But nearly half of sales arrive during lunch, creating a compressed rush, and about 42% of sales are now digital. Feed app, pickup, and delivery orders into the same line as the customers standing at the counter, and convenience for one group becomes frustration for the other. Jersey Mike's responded by building what is effectively a second restaurant inside the first one. Nearly every location created a separate production line for digital orders, while major delivery platforms were integrated into the point-of-sale system rather than managed through a collection of competing tablets. One line protects the visible deli experience. The other absorbs the invisible demand. That physical separation explains how Jersey Mike's can preserve an intentionally manual counter process while sending almost half its sales through digital channels. It did not automate away the theater. It protected the theater with a second production system. A differentiated sandwich is not enough. The franchise economics have to make somebody willing to fund the next restaurant. Jersey Mike's is almost the opposite of Chick-fil-A's operator model. Chick-fil-A generally funds and controls the restaurant assets, while the operator contributes a relatively small initial fee and owns no saleable equity. At Jersey Mike's, the franchisee provides the capital, signs the lease, pays for the build-out, and owns the operating business. The typical build-out reported by Jersey Mike's costs about $515,000. Under the latest standard agreement, the initial franchise fee is $20,000, with a $10,000 development fee for stores committed through a development agreement. Corporate collects a 6.5% royalty on gross sales and another 5% for advertising. On an average restaurant producing roughly $1.4 million, Jersey Mike's reports a store-level margin near 16%, and, based on franchisee-reported figures that were not independently verified, cash-on-cash returns around 42%. Those are system measures, not promises. But they explain why existing owners keep reinvesting. At the end of 2025, Jersey Mike's had more than 630 franchise owners. More than 330 operated only 1 or 2 stores, while about 80 operated 10 or more. Roughly 90% of the company's 1,600-store domestic pipeline was connected to franchisees already inside the system. A franchisor can sell a dream to a first-time buyer. It is much harder to persuade an operator who already knows the labor schedule, food costs, and royalty statement to build 5 more unless the arithmetic works. That repeat development is the engine. Franchisees supply most of the capital for expansion. Corporate collects a percentage of the resulting sales. In fiscal 2025, the franchisor produced $724 million in revenue and approximately $339 million in adjusted EBITDA, a margin near 47%, while reporting only about $11 million in capital expenditures. That is not the financial profile of a company personally constructing thousands of restaurants. It is the profile of a royalty platform, and it explains why private equity became interested. But Jersey Mike's has not treated franchisee economics as somebody else's problem. In 2020, the company committed roughly $150 million to remodel stores across the system, about $75,000 per restaurant, while covering the cost for franchisees. Better stores could lift sales. Higher sales meant more profit for operators and more royalty revenue for corporate. Stronger operators could then build more restaurants. This was not charity, it was alignment. After nearly collapsing in 1991, Cancro understood that extracting the maximum fee from a weak restaurant was worth less than taking a durable share of a strong one for 20 years. Healthy stores create repeat franchisees. Repeat franchisees fund expansion. Expansion generates royalties and advertising dollars, which strengthen the brand and improve the next store. The franchisor takes relatively little construction risk, but the whole flywheel still depends on a number corporate does not directly control: the revenue earned inside each franchisee's restaurant. There is a softer layer over the economics, and it is not decoration. Every March, Jersey Mike's runs a month of giving that ends with a day of giving, when participating restaurants donate 100% of that day's sales, not profits, to local charities. Since the campaign began in 2011, it has raised more than $166 million. Giving away an entire day of system-wide sales looks irrational if the only calculation ends that night. Over time, it is one of the most effective local marketing systems a national chain could design. Most stores work with causes customers nearby recognize: hospitals, food banks, schools, youth organizations, and community programs. Corporate supplies the national event and the deadline. The local franchisee gives it meaning. That is the same product the slicer sells: the feeling of a neighborhood sandwich shop delivered through a national system. At the counter, a repeatable process feels personal. In the community, a repeatable corporate campaign feels local. National advertising, including campaigns featuring Danny DeVito, who grew up near the original shop, creates awareness. By 2025, aided brand awareness had reached approximately 90%, while the My Mike's loyalty program had more than 12.5 million active members. Technology now allows the chain to recognize customers at a scale the original shop never could. But the promise remains surprisingly similar. We know what you like, we make it in front of you, and this store belongs to this place. The clearest comparison is the company that ruled the category for decades. Subway optimized for accessibility. Stores were comparatively inexpensive to open, kitchens fit into small spaces, and the system could expand almost anywhere. That strategy produced extraordinary reach, but eventually the reach became exposure. Restaurants competed with other Subway locations, operators struggled with discounting and unit economics, and the US system lost thousands of stores from its peak. Subway remains far larger than Jersey Mike's and continues to generate billions in sales. This is not an obituary. It is a contrast in what each system historically treated as the unit of growth. Subway became exceptionally good at producing more locations. Jersey Mike's focused on increasing what each location could produce. In 2016, Jersey Mike's average unit volume was about $825,000. By 2025, it was roughly $1.4 million, and 6% of the system exceeded $2 million. A stronger restaurant can support more labor, absorb a higher build-out cost, fund local marketing, and convince an experienced owner to build another one. Jersey Mike's generally targets visible end cap or inline spaces in strong retail centers instead of forcing a restaurant into every available trade area. The lesson is not that fewer stores are always better. Jersey Mike's opens hundreds each year. The lesson is that the restaurant, not the development agreement, must remain the economic product. A weak unit counts as growth on opening day. It becomes a liability every day after that. That brings us to the ownership change and the tension underneath it. In January 2025, Blackstone completed its acquisition of Jersey Mike's. The transaction was widely valued at about $8 billion, including debt. The company's later prospectus recorded a purchase price of $6.3 billion. Cancro, who had rejected a partner at 17 and spent 50 years controlling the company, finally took one. He retained a minority stake, but in April 2025, Charlie Morrison became chief executive. Morrison had led Wingstop, taken it public, and helped turn another operationally simple, heavily franchised restaurant into a global growth brand. The appointment was not subtle. It told the market what Jersey Mike's intended to become. 18 months after the acquisition, the company went public. Shares priced at $23, opened at $21, and closed the first day at $21.63. Roughly two-thirds of the shares in the offering came from existing holders selling part of their stakes rather than from the company issuing new shares. Blackstone still retained decisive voting control, limiting the influence of ordinary public shareholders. Jersey Mike's also carried approximately $2.1 billion in debt, and part of the proceeds received by the company was directed toward repayment. None of this proves the sandwiches will get worse. The company continued raising average unit volumes, investing in digital systems, and adding restaurants. But ownership changes what management is asked to explain. For 50 years, nobody could force Cancro to justify the slicer every 3 months. It cost labor, but he believed the labor was the product. A public company with a private equity sponsor, a debt load, and quarterly expectations faces a recurring question. What is the cheapest version of the experience customers will not notice? The danger is not one dramatic decision. It is 100 defensible ones. One less employee during a slow hour, one lower cost ingredient that tests almost as well, one more promotion added to the line, one new trade area approved slightly closer to an existing restaurant. A local feeling is rarely destroyed all at once. It is optimized away in increments. The clock has started, and the expensive part of the sandwich is now visible not only to customers, but to analysts. So far, the machine is still working. System-wide sales grew approximately 13% in 2025 to about $4.2 billion. Average unit volume rose to roughly $1.4 million. But the composition of growth is changing. Same-store sales increased 3.2% in 2025, well below the strongest recent years, while preliminary company figures showed growth of about 2% through the first half of 2026. More of the headline increase now comes from opening restaurants. Management believes the United States can support at least 7,500 Jersey Mike's locations and says the global opportunity could reach 15,000. In 2026, the domestic pipeline stood at roughly 1,600 restaurants. That is the opportunity investors are buying. It is also the test. The entire pipeline depends on franchisees remaining willing to commit roughly $500,000 to each new location. That investment is compelling when average sales are $1.4 million and the store-level margin is about 16%. Reduce either number through wage pressure, food inflation, discounting, or cannibalization, and development can slow quickly. At 3,300 restaurants, Jersey Mike's can still describe itself as underpenetrated. At 7,500, new stores will increasingly arrive near customers who already have one. More restaurants require more franchisees, more field support, more good retail sites, more trained managers, and much more meat, cheese, and bread meeting the same standards. The premium price adds another constraint. Customers compare Jersey Mike's not only with Subway or Jimmy John's, but with grocery store prepared food and a lunch brought from home. Its 2026 satisfaction ranking suggests customers currently believe the experience justifies the price. That is a valuable position, not an exemption from arithmetic. And Jersey Mike's cannot casually add breakfast, coffee, late night, and dozens of unrelated menu items without damaging the simplicity that makes the line work. Domestic growth has boundaries, which is why the next test is international. Jersey Mike's has entered Canada and signed an agreement to develop 400 restaurants across the United Kingdom and Ireland, with the first expected to open in 2026. The franchisee leading that European expansion is a company led by Peter Cancro himself. On paper, the concept is portable. The equipment is straightforward, the menu is focused, and visible preparation requires no translation. But the brand sells a specifically American idea of the Jersey Shore deli. In the United States, Jersey signals a place, an attitude, and a regional sandwich tradition. In Britain and Ireland, that story does not arrive preloaded, and both countries already have deeply established sandwich cultures. Supply chains become part of the promise. Fresh bread is an advantage only if local sourcing and training reproduce the expected texture. Sliced-to-order meat is theatrical only if the product earns the attention. International franchising can reproduce standards faster than it can reproduce meaning. Adapt too little, and the brand may feel foreign. Adapt too much, and Mike's Way becomes one more topping option in a generic sandwich chain. Step back, and the entire company resolves into a loop. Keeping the slicer makes the food visibly different. Visible craft supports a premium price. That premium helps produce strong average unit volumes. Strong volumes make a $515,000 franchise investment rationale. Franchisees then fund most of the expansion, allowing corporate to collect royalties while using relatively little physical capital. Those royalties fund advertising, technology, franchisee support, and a national giving program that deepens the local attachment. That attachment brings the customer back to the slicer. For nearly 2 decades, the Loop produced higher average sales every year. The genius is not a secret sauce. It is that the product, the economics, and the culture all tell the same story. Somebody is still paying attention. But loops can reverse. If aggressive development weakens site selection, store returns fall. If returns fall, experienced franchisees stop expanding. If labor is reduced to protect margins, the visible process becomes a visible delay. If ingredient quality falls, the slicer begins proving the opposite of what it once proved. Jersey Mike's is not at that point. Its restaurants are growing, customer satisfaction leads the industry, and the pipeline is substantial. The operating machine is genuinely impressive. But the next phase requires a different skill. Peter Cancro spent 50 years turning one neighborhood store into a national system. Blackstone, Charlie Morrison, and the public market now want to turn that system into a global platform. So the next time you stand at the counter and watch an employee pull out a piece of meat while the line waits, understand what you are actually seeing. You are not looking at a slow sandwich shop. You are looking at 50 years of somebody refusing to remove the expensive part. At one store, that is craftsmanship. At 3,300, it is an operating system. At 15,000, it will be a promise under enormous pressure. The machine works. That question is settled. The one still open is whether the company can keep winning by being slower now that speed is what its new owners have promised.